Good morning and welcome to the Public Safety and Justice Subcommittee. Today is Wednesday, December 14th, 2022. We'll call the meeting to order. Do we have any public comments? No public comments this morning. Our first item is approval of the minutes. Do we have a motion?
Move to approve.
Motion and
second.
A motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion pass. Oh, any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Item 2 is the judicial reappointment to the municipal court. Is there a motion to reappoint Judge Cynthia Serta for a 4-year term?
I move to reappoint Judge Cynthia Serta to a 4-year term expiring January 19th, 2027.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor of reappointing Judge Cynthia Serta to a 4-year term, please indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Congratulations to Judge Serta. The motion passed unanimously. Thank you for your service. We will now go to the residential lockbox access program, and for that we have Chief Duran and Deputy Chief Meyer. Good morning. Those name tags are a little sticky this morning. Good morning, Chief Duran.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. Thank you for having us here this morning. We do have a couple presentations this morning. And our first one to start off with is to talk about the residential lockbox access pilot program. This program is going to lie within our public affairs, which is our community outreach and education programs section. And with us today, I have Deputy Chief Joe Meyer, who oversees this section and will be presenting on this program and the implementation of this. So with that, I'll turn it over to Chief Meyer.
Excellent. Good morning.
Good morning, Chairwoman O'Brien and members of the subcommittee. This morning, we're going to be providing an overview and recommendations for the residential lockbox access program. This pilot program is basically designed to help firefighters address access challenges that we encounter when responding to emergencies. Access challenges include residents with decreased mobility, pre-existing medical conditions, or special needs that impair a resident's ability to allow fire crews into their home. If residents are not able to allow firefighters into their home, the captain and the crews have kind of a difficult challenge in how they're going to gain access. In emergency, we all understand that time is very important and critical to delivering service. Typically, the crew will have to either break a window or force a door, causing damage to the occupant's home. The solution is going to be a lockbox. We have with us here. Lockboxes are placed in pre-designated areas of the residence in the exterior of the home. Residents can place either keys, access cards, or even pertinent medical information to include allergies or pre-existing medical conditions to help with their care if they choose. The addresses, location of the lockbox, and combination will be stored in a database will be managed by Public Affairs. This information is important because then we can share that information with our dispatchers. When a call comes in, the address will prompt the information of where the lockbox is to include the combination so that fire crews can quickly access the home. The pilot will begin in the new year and it will start in Council District number 1. There is no financial impact to this program. We're receiving a generous donation from the Phoenix Realtors for 100 lockboxes. At this time, we're requesting the Public Safety and Justice Subcommittee recommend to the full council authorize the acceptance of a lockbox donation. This is going to be item 67 today during the formal council meeting. Thank you for your time and support. This concludes our presentation, and we'd love to answer any questions you may have at this time.
Thank you. Questions, members?
No, seems like a fantastic program. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Thank you for being here to present this, and thank you for all the hard work that your staff has done to get this up and rolling. We are I'm really excited about this partnership with the Phoenix Association of Realtors. So thank you. With that, we'll call for, do I have a motion?
Motion to approve?
Second.
A motion to approve and a second. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously. Thank you, gentlemen. All right, our next, I guess only one of you gets to get up. Outside Combustible Storage Program. We have Chief Mike Duran and Assistant Chief Kreis and Marshal Steve Petrie, and I'm sorry if I mispronounced that. Apologize.
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, thank you again for having us here for this presentation. This program, the Outside Combustible Storage Program, is pretty important to us in the fire department. This program lies within our fire prevention section, which is overseen by Assistant Chief Tim Kreis here, as well as the program oversight is with our Assistant Fire Marshal here, Steve Petrie. Again, this program was created as a result of significant fire that we had in the valley here a couple years ago, and which Chief Kreis will be talking about here shortly. With that, we were able to receive, and with your support and leadership, we were able to receive 4 supplemental positions for fire inspectors dedicated to this program here. As you well know, we have several sites across the valley here that do storage large amount of materials on their sites. And these are very dynamic as far as the movement of these materials. And so having this oversight and continuous inspection for compliance in these areas is very important to us. Again, this promotes mitigation efforts for our programs here in the city of Phoenix, for our community, as well as for the safety of our firefighters. So with that, I will turn it over to Chief Kreis and Assistant Fire Marshal Petrie. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Duran. Chairwoman O'Brien, members of the subcommittee, good morning. So we'll start with the genesis of the program as Chief Duran described. And on June 5th, 2021, we had the largest fire in Phoenix regional history. This fire was located at 35th Avenue in Lincoln. It was a 6-alarm fire, required over 200 fire personnel from 10 automatic aid partners to ultimately put it out. It was a 96-hour operation. It was a tremendous impact to the fire department. We had to execute on several of our plans to continue to deliver service to the rest of the community and put this fire out. We did have 2 firefighters that got injured at this fire. One of them has since retired. Both of them have since recovered. I spoke to the one who retired actually just recently. He's doing very well. But this was a significant incident for us, as Chief Duran discussed. Apologize that pictures didn't come up, but these are some of the photos of that incident. Here's a map that we produced. It sort of outlines the size and scope of this incident. The areas that you're seeing there on the map in red are indicating those buildings and that property that was totally destroyed by the fire. The area highlighted in blue is representative of the areas that were evacuated, which did include some residential areas. The highlighted spaces there in yellow are representative of businesses that were impacted but not totally destroyed. This fire did extend a little bit past 35th Avenue, but firefighters were able to get a handle on that piece of it. With the high temperatures and high winds of that day, this fire was tremendous. I recall responding to this fire when it got to a second alarm, and I could see it from my house 30 miles away. And at that time, I knew I needed to make a phone call to the fire chief. So speaking a little bit about this, the question that we ask ourselves is how can we prevent these fires? And when we're talking about outside combustible storage facilities, what we're talking about is pallet yards, we're talking about lumber yards, we're talking about tire recycling facilities of all types of material, we're talking about mulching operations, compost operations, and others. Can't ever totally prevent these fires. Cars are going to catch fire, forklifts are going to catch fire, accidents are going to happen. But our goal must be to keep these fires small, keeping the impacts to the community small, the impacts to the environment small, the impacts to the businesses small. And that's really our goal. We want to create a situation where those facilities are compliant with the fire code. So in the event that they do catch on fire, those fires are manageable. So how do we do that? Well, the first step is we got to address the fire problem. And the volume of material at these sites needs to be compliant with the fire code. The distance between the combustible storage piles also needs to be compliant with the fire code. Need to be separated adequately from property lines and structures, of course. And the reason for this is because it helps to prevent massive fires that radiate heat out to other combustible storage materials, making for these giant fires. Let's see, excuse me. The second thing we got to do is support our firefighters. So we do that by making sure that we have hydrants that are accessible, that we have access for firefighting equipment, the ability to tactically position that equipment in relevant locations so we can put it to work to extinguish the fire, and also the ability to deploy hose lines and firefighters for fire stream management in ways to extinguish these fires. So talking a little bit about the impact of outside combustible storage program efforts, this is really about community risk reduction, and that is our focus on this one. This program reduces risks to the environment. It reduces smoke pumping out into the air, into the atmosphere. It reduces the runoff from firefighting hose streams that's washing into neighborhoods and into the water system. It has a significant environmental impact. The other impact of the outside combustible storage program is the impact positively to our firefighters. Is when we're on these fires for incidents like the one we described before, for 96 hours, that's a tremendous impact to our firefighters working for a very, very long time. They're exposed to that toxic material, the heat and the heat stress that it puts on them and others. It's really a big deal about firefighter safety. And lastly, there's impacts to communities and neighborhoods. Is being able to prevent these giant fires is very, very good for communities, not having to evacuate neighborhoods, and also the ability to keep those businesses in business and keep those impacts very small, has a positive impact on our economy and keeping people working. So talking a little bit about the outside combustible storage program, the first thing that I want to cover this morning is the philosophy of the Phoenix Fire Prevention Division. And that philosophy is focused on education, engineering, and enforcement. And when we talk about education, the first and most important and most successful means to achieve fire code compliance with the people we partner with is to be able to provide them education on why the fire code requirements are important. This is often about history. This is often about historical fires and things that we aim to prevent, and that strategy is extraordinarily effective. It's a strategy that we use in every application in fire prevention and a strategy that we use here. The second thing that we do is we look to engineer solutions with our community and with our business owners, and that is to say we work with them to achieve fire code compliance. And at the end of the day, we are committed to ensuring that we have compliance with the fire code through enforcement efforts when it gets to that point. Since July of 2021, we've inspected 151 outside combustible storage facilities, and that has been a tremendous amount of work. And credit to the Fire Marshal's office, folks like Assistant Fire Marshal Steve Petrie, and especially our fire inspectors who've committed a tremendous amount of work in partnering with these folks and getting them into compliance. The resulting impact of this has been a 55% reduction in outside combustible storage fires, and that's tremendous. Something else that's really important to reflect on is the fires that we've had have been considerably smaller on those places that our fire prevention efforts have connected with those customers on those 151 sites. The fire chief and I were at a recycling fire, I think it was probably 12 months ago or somewhere in there, and it was a fire that started and the site was clean, very much fire code compliant, and we were able to put that fire out very quickly. Getting our fire companies back in service, it was a good thing. As it stands, we have 4 inspectors who are committed to the OCS program, and we've also trained all the inspectors in the fire inspection unit on how to inspect and provide service on these particular sites. Got a couple pictures here. This is a before and after picture of a site that we worked with. I'd like to highlight the size of that pile, the mud and the inability to put fire trucks in reasonable positions, and the separation there in the after picture associated with the building. Another one here, this one is really an interesting one where you have a recycling sort of facility here and the after picture. This particular site's business owner did have some pretty interesting comments for our fire inspector because there was a fire on this site after we had the inspection efforts out there, and the feedback from the owner to the fire prevention inspector who did the work out there was it was really cool to see how these fire code requirements and these efforts made for a positive outcome, and that's something to be proud of. That inspector has since been promoted to deputy fire marshal, and she's doing a great job for us. With that, we will open it up to any questions, and thank you.
Councilwoman Ansari.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Thank you so much to Chief Duran, Lori, and everyone here. Obviously, the large fire was in my district last year, and I appreciate all of the work that we have done together since then. I think the fact that we've seen a 55% reduction is fantastic. I still have a couple of questions regarding the ongoing work that we are doing. I do think we need to put more pressure on the county to especially do more when it comes to the surrounding residents. You talked about the impacts to the community and to the neighbors. Even if when it's not a huge, historic fire, but the smaller scale fires, every time there is an incident, I receive photos, videos from residents, and it's really, really alarming for the residents who are around there. I know asthma is rampant in the neighborhood. Noise is very prevalent from a lot of these recycling plants, and neighbors just feel very frustrated and angry and left behind. Even though, they understand the 55% success rate, I think it's about mitigating the impacts that they still feel, even when it's a smaller scale fire. So, a couple of questions. In regard to the 4 additional fire prevention specialist positions, can you tell me a little bit more about the community risk reduction activities that they are going to be doing? Can you just elaborate a little bit on that work for me?
Madam Chair, Councilwoman, I'm sorry, thank you for that question. This is an important program for us in our system here, and the training that these folks are receiving here, specific to these areas here, is going to be important for us for the future in mitigating these measures here. So I would like to turn it over to my subject matter expert here, our Assistant Fire Marshal, to talk a little bit more specifically on code compliance and how we're going to work with our community and business partners on this.
Hi, Chairwoman O'Brien and members of the subcommittee. Yeah, the 4 additional bodies are going to help us as it relates to outside combustible storage, in that we simply can't conduct enough inspections in a year with the members we have now. Okay. As the slide pointed out, we've had 151 sites inspected up to this point. They're on our database. We have approximately 282 sites that are out there that we are aware about. We prioritize those inspections to make sure we try to get the most vulnerable, the most at-risk ones first. Now those 4 will help us try to see out the remainder. Additionally, as you might tell by some of those pictures, the sites are pretty transient in how they conduct their business, so they often move, and we need to be out there as often as possible to conduct doing work. So those 4 additional people will allow us to get to more of those sites more often.
So for clarification, the 151 inspections that you did do was prior to hiring these 4 new specialists?
Correct. We have not hired those 4. We used the resources we had at the time.
Okay. So with the 4 new ones, theoretically you should be able to, like you said, be there a lot more often and maintain close contact to make sure that even if one day somebody is in compliance, a week later they are as well, or a month later.
Yes, ma'am. Additionally, as Chief had pointed out, we did train the remainder of our inspectors to be able to transition over when needed in times of, like I said, need or special events where we can have additional resources go out to help us as well. We did not have that a year ago.
Okay. So is the majority of these 4 positions, the majority of their role is to do code enforcement? What other education or, engagement will they be doing with the sites?
Yeah, so those 4 will be inspectors. Their primary role is enforcement or inspections, but as with any inspections we do our very best to try and educate at the forefront of the inspection. It's far better for us to educate the customers to enforce on themselves, as this customer had pointed out how happy they were with the results of that fire. That will do far better than our inspection efforts ever will, because they'll be policing themselves along the way. So education is at the forefront of what we do.
Okay. And when will these 4 specialists start?
We are trying to hire them now. We're going through the process of hiring a group.
Can I add some clarity to that? Thank you, Chairwoman. Thank you for your question, Councilwoman. Sorry. We do have 4 inspectors dedicated to this effort now. Mm-hmm. We do have vacancies in our inspection pool. And right now, filling those vacancies is a high priority to us. There's vacancies across the city, and we are going to get those vacancies filled, but we do have 4 people focused on this now.
Okay, but I meant for the 4 new ones.
Yes.
They are in the hiring process.
That's correct.
Okay. And then in regards to one suggestion that I had a couple months ago was around, support that we could provide to communities who are affected by air quality issues. For example, providing purifiers. Is that a program that either we can look towards starting to mitigate impacts that residents are feeling, or something that we can work with the county to do?
Madam Chair, Councilwoman Ansari, members of the subcommittee, that is not something that we've approached yet. However, we could possibly work with the county or have discussions with the county on maybe some sort of possibility of looking at the air quality for that area and how to help improve those for those residents in those areas that specifically in the areas that I know you're referencing.
That would be a priority for me if that's an action item that we could take from today. Again, no matter the percentage reduction that we show, I think consistently the residents directly surrounding that Friedman area, surrounding the Ames recycling plant, others are just very concerned about the health impacts that are coming from the fires and just the work that is being done there in any case. So even if it's as simple as providing a little bit of funding for air purifiers or doing a little bit more analysis. I know air quality falls under the county, but I think we need to be pushing them to do more in that regard. So I would appreciate that as a next step or something we can look into. And then another piece that we had discussed is the fines for those who do not end in compliance. I know some of the fines, what were they, $100, $1,000?
They can, and I'm going to turn this over to Chief Christ here, but they can range from anywhere between $250 to $2,500 per day on these here. But yes, we are having conversations with the prosecutor's office right now, and I'll let Chief Christ talk a little bit about our partnership and working with them to help as in regards to these cases here as they come to the court system.
Thank you, Chief Duran. So yeah, the fire code does allow for a maximum $2,500 per day per violation fine. And we are working closely with the prosecutor's office and training our inspectors so when we do have to go to court, we can represent those court cases very well. Okay.
Again, I feel very strongly that for some of these big companies, that number is basically a slap on the wrist. So anything we can do to also just evaluate those numbers and whether or not they really are sufficient for the impact, the negative impact that not being in compliance has. But I do very much thank you. This is a big. I think a lot of the major fires have happened in District 7 because that's where a lot of the industrial is in the city of Phoenix, and I think we owe it to residents who, through no fault of their own, through zoning, that has been there for years, are forced to live in these areas. I think we owe it to them to do everything we can, and to you all. I know, as you mentioned, the impacts to firefighters is severe in the health. So I appreciate everything you're doing to decrease the number of instances. But anything innovative that we can look into to support residents when we know this will keep happening would be much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen, for your efforts. It is commendable the reduction we've seen at 55%. So I'm very excited about that and look forward to you filling those positions so we can continue to decrease that number. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for the presentation.
Thank you.
All right, we will move to item number 5, unmanned aircraft systems programs update. For that, we will have Executive Assistant Fire Chief Scott Walker, Police Commander Brian Lee, and Park and Recreation's Deputy Director Jared Rogers.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. I'm actually going to start off the presentation this morning. We are here to update you on our unmanned aircraft systems program, also known more simply as our drone program. And as you mentioned with me today, I have Executive Assistant Chief for the Fire Department, Scott Walker. We have Commander Brian Lee from our Police Department, as well as Deputy Director Jared Rogers from our Parks and Recreation Department. So just to remind everyone how far we've come with this program development, we've been working on this quite a bit this year. We actually started with a presentation to this very subcommittee in January. We had an additional discussion at a February formal council meeting where the council approved drone purchases for our police department. We also and previously had an approval for the fire department to move forward with their program. In March and April, we conducted 15 community engagement meetings at the request of the council to make sure that we were addressing any community concerns, especially those related to civil liberties or privacy concerns. So we conducted those over a 2-month period, and then we came back to this subcommittee in May of this year for an additional presentation on the changes and additions that we made to our policies based on those community engagement sessions, as well as our plans moving forward for each of the 3 departments that are here today, and ultimately moved forward with our drone programs, beginning in June with the fire department launching their program and having their policy approved through the executive committee, which I'll talk about in just a moment. In July of this year, we moved forward a little further. We did some application reviews for our executive committee community seats. So another outcome of the May subcommittee discussion, or the engagement meetings really, was to add community seats to our executive committee, which is our body that approves policy. So we conducted that application process in July, some interviews, and the selection process was held in August, and ultimately selected 2 community members, which you'll learn more about today and actually get to meet one of them in person. We also discussed in October at the executive committee, which did include our 2 new community members, the police department policy, and that policy was ultimately approved, and the police department program was launched in November. So we've made a great deal of progress on moving these programs forward this year, and we're here to share with you where we're at with each of them. But just a reminder before we talk about the programs themselves, I wanted to remind you of the governance structure that we have in place. We're very proud of this structure, and we feel like it provides consistency as well as ensures privacy and transparency for our community. And this particular administrative regulation is a citywide document. It's a governance for citywide policy, and it provides the parameters for any department who may wish to engage in the use of drones in their business. And it also requires them to go through certain steps before they're able to do so. So they actually have to develop a policy, present that to the Technical Safety and Privacy Subcommittee to make sure that all of the technical elements of the policy are in place from various perspectives, legally, from an IT security standpoint, from a safety standpoint. And then once it makes it through that committee, it will go to the executive committee for final approval. This is the path that these 3 departments either have gone through in the case of police and fire, or will go through in the case of parks, as well as any other department in the city who wants to utilize drones in their business. So the actual approval process is to go through those steps. There are consultations with aviation, law, ITS, and communications in that process. Because fire and police are our first adopters, they are also engaged and assisting as other departments such as parks are developing their programs. The application to the TS&P subcommittee is a formal application, and they're reviewed and approved through a committee process, as well as through the executive committee process, which is made up of executive level staff, including myself, the fire chief, police chief, aviation director, and chief information officer. Our executive committee really is charged with approving those policies and establishing the standards that are required in the standard operating procedures within the departments. As I mentioned, it's comprised of city staff, and we also have two community members who have joined us, and I wanted to take a moment to introduce you to those two community members. Online, we have James Plager. James is one of our two community members. He is a cybersecurity expert. He's been working in that cybersecurity field for nearly 2 decades. He is focused on helping individuals maintain their privacy on the internet. He has also worked in the defense industry, and during that time is when he was introduced to drones or unmanned aircraft systems and became fascinated with them. So over the years, he's continued to use his platforms as well as his day-to-day life and experience in cybersecurity to combine those things and to provide his expertise to us on the drone committee. He has an interest in public policy and some expertise in privacy and security, as well as an interest in drones themselves, and so he's been a great addition to our committee. And then sitting right behind me today, I'd like to ask Lavier Rice to please stand just quickly so you can meet him. Lavier is the second member of our committee. He is the founder and chief executive officer of an aerospace manufacturing company, which is based right here in Phoenix. He's been a Phoenix Metro resident since 2002. He's also a military veteran who served on active duty and has quite a bit of experience as a drone pilot himself and worked in the industry. Lavier is married to his wife of 9 years, and they share 4 children. He's also an alumnus of Phoenix College and Arizona State University. So we're excited to have both Lavier and James with us as community members, and we can tell just by the initial meeting that we had with them how much of a contribution they are making to our policy development and making sure that we are both using best practices as well as maintaining security as well as privacy for all of our residents. So I just want to thank both of them for their participation and their commitment.
Yes, thank you, James and Lavier, for serving on this committee. Appreciate that.
So with that, we will move into the next portion of the presentation and learn about where our departments have taken their program so far. Chief Walker?
So thank you, Lori. Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. Appreciate the opportunity to be here today and really provide you with an update on the fire department's UAV program. So today we want to cover a few different topics. We want to talk about our program development since being approved, our initial operations, some of the emergency responses we've actually utilized Drone 1 on, the outreach efforts we've have undertaken, and the future of where our program is going to go or we hope to take it. So I want to start by saying, as the first formally approved UAS program for the City of Phoenix, we have been extremely busy over the last 6 months. The first direction we gave to our program coordinator and program manager was, failure is not an option. We will only have successes. And I'm happy to tell you, we have achieved that goal to date. I do want to take just a minute and recognize Division Chief Dan Cheatham, our program manager, and Captain Brian Gearin, our program coordinator. They have done the lion's share and done tremendous work bringing our program to where it is today over the last 6 months. So I want to thank both of them and recognize them for their efforts. They worked very hard on this. So some of the activities we've undertaken is, so we did, as Lori mentioned, had our policies, procedures, went through the executive process and were approved. So we were in line with the city AR in that structure. We have, apologies, the slides are maybe something out of sequence here. I apologize. Catch up my slides here. Okay, so as I said, we went through our policy procedure, went through the UAS executive committee process and are formally approved. We immediately engaged our UAV consultant. This was important because we wanted to leverage the experience of this individual in the UAV space and UAS space, really to leverage your experience and knowledge to help bring our program online even faster and make sure we're taking advantage of best practices across the country and other programs. We continued with our key stakeholder collaboration. This was again important regionally with other fire departments, police departments, and also nationally with other departments that have already brought on programs. This was really helpful in letting us make sure we were not making any mistakes that others may have made. We developed our training program. Our training program ended up being 68 hours to be fully trained as a UAV pilot for the City of Phoenix Fire Department. We developed our mission parameters. We wanted to start somewhat narrow in our use cases because we want to make sure we didn't try to go do too much too fast and have failure. So we want to start with areas we know we could add value, we could build upon that. And so we identified those mission parameters. We purchased our initial UAVs. What we ended up settling on was buying 3 of the Skydio X2E UAVs. These were approved through the Blue List, which is the Department of Defense list on cybersecurity. So we know we could get those units online faster, eliminating the questions of cybersecurity. So we chose those units to start with. We trained our sworn staff, and understand is we did not have a budget to start this program, so we were using all our current budget and our current staff. So we used sworn staff because we did not have any full-time employees dedicated to this program. So our staff are really multitaskers. They're doing other operations within the fire department, but now are also UAV pilots for us. To date, we have 107 pilots. We have 3 visual observers. We chose to have both the pilot and the visual observer. We felt it was a better model for us in our response and allow us to have that person communicate back with our command structure on a major incident, having the visual observer. We were able to repurpose an existing vehicle within the fire department for our response vehicle for Drone 1. Drone 1 is the name we've given to our program and our response. And we did commit, as we committed to being very transparent, we were reporting to city leadership, each of you, mayor and council, to city leadership and city manager's office daily. Anytime we used a UAV on an incident, we report to you. A large fire, a recycling yard fire, a mountain rescue, we include that in reporting daily so you know when we've used a drone and the impact it may have had. Then we also have been working with the city manager's office to make sure the commitment of providing forward-facing to the community use cases as well. So we provide a 30-day report that is posted on the city manager's website so our community can see how and when we're using a UAV or a UAS system here in the city of Phoenix for the fire department. So next, we want to talk a little bit about some of the initial operations. This is really the value, seeing the value of the UAS system for the fire department. So our program launched, and pun intended on that, on June 12th of 2022. As I said, we named it PFD Drone 1. It went in service, and within hours, we saw immediate value. The 2 pictures you see on this slide, I want to explain what those are. The picture on the left is a brush incident that we had just south of the airport between the city of Phoenix and the city of Tempe. This was very unique. We flew this mission within hours of going in service. It was a brush fire incident within that area. This really showed the value of our training and our collaboration and coordination because we're in restricted airspace at this location. So we had to make sure the airport knew we were there, they were okay we were flying there. The drone added value because we actually had a brush fire. We needed to find access into the fire, but also we found a very large encampment in this area that could have been threatened by the fire. So the drone proved almost unmeasurably valuable on that incident immediately in day 1. Second is the picture you see in the lower right side. This is actually a picture of the controller, so this is what the pilot is seeing on this incident. This is a 3-story building that had a fire in the roof structure. Why this is important is if you look in that picture, you can see the roof structure is not typical or not normal. This is important because our command officer now has the ability to see what that roof structure looks like. So when firefighters are telling command what they're doing and how they're doing it, it's going to make more sense. Command can make better decisions based on the information they're receiving from the drone. So these first two incidents I covered were actually on day 1 and really proved value for us. So additionally, our program, as we kicked it off, our hours are Monday through Friday from 0600 to 1700 hours. It is a 2-person response vehicle, as I said, with our pilot in charge and a visual observer. We are daylight-only operations initially and do intend to and plan to extend to a 24 operation over time. And then we did have those limited dispatch nature codes, which I'll talk about on the next slide, what those are for you, but we wanted, again, to keep it within the realm of success for us. And then finally, we are using analytics. We've talked about being a data-driven department. We're using those analytics to really understand where the program should go, how can we add value to the fire department and the city of Phoenix, how can we be the most effective and efficient to our community and what we do every day. So we're using those analytics to drive that type of a program. So next, the deployment, the models that we chose to use to start the program off with. First, nature codes, or how we dispatch units. Greater alarm structure fires. So this is really a fire that would be larger than a typical house fire incident. Multiple unit response allows the drone to get on scene, get overhead, and start adding value in those larger incidents. Recycling yard fires are a perfect example where this can really add value. Brush fire incidents, you'll see a slide about that in a minute, how valuable it can be on a brush fire. Brush fires can be often large areas, poor access, poor water supply. Getting that drone overhead to really help us route our crews in, find out any exposures we might have. As I mentioned, having a homeless encampment in the brush area south or just north of Tempe really proved valuable for us as well in that incident. And then mountain rescues, this is one of the ones we presented initially, as we knew we'd have real value, be able to find the potential patient, route crews into that patient. South Mountain's a perfect example. Large mountain, oftentimes we would start crews from all sides. By now getting the drone overhead, we can route a crew into the shortest route to that patient. Again, allow us to get that patient quickly, provide care, and get that person off the mountain. We also looked at non-emergent uses because we know we're not going to have an emergency use every day for the drone to respond to. So we want to make sure that how can we best utilize this tool. So non-emergent applications we initially started with our public affairs section. So they can go out and if they want to capture video for an incident for a PSA, they are using and can use the drone as well, or our drone folks can go out and do that work for them. Training, again, we can capture now video that we can use in our command training center and our simulations, so it's going to be more realistic training for our members. And then finally, our fire investigations. This is another area that we talked about initially. We knew we could have value. For instance, a large fire in a warehouse, we might not be able to get our investigators in there due to safety concerns. We can use the drone to capture information, so we are using it on those incidents already. And then a few incidents I want to cover, again, that we have already seen the value, we responded to. These are real incidents. So this picture is a brush fire. This is in Councilman Waring's district at the 51 and the 101. This is a great comparison because we had the same fire about a year prior. So in this fire, and you can see in the red circle a small whiff of smoke. That's a small fire in there. Again, we had some individuals experiencing homelessness living in the brush area. So they were what we would consider exposure or risk. We found that information out by having the drone overhead to find that encampment. You can see access, as I talked about. We can find the best route with the drone one. And what's important is you look at the screen on the left. This is our record and our CAD of that incident. So you can see we were able to get on scene. We were able to get that information. We were able to identify what the fire, the size of the fire, where the fire was, what our threats were, best access, and start canceling units. So we actually only held one fire engine on this incident this time. The year prior, I actually was at this fire because there was so many incidents. It was such a large incident. Myself, the fire chief, Chief Christ, will often respond to those incidents. We had so many units on that last year, we actually had the freeway closed. So again, you can see real value by having that drone and getting that information on this incident.
Thank you. Councilman Waring has a question.
Thank you, I appreciate it. So what are the, I guess for lack of a better word, rules about state trust land? Can you send the drones out over state trust land looking for the fires? Because that's happened. I called in a fire myself one time coming back from Tatum Ranch from door knocking, probably in 2019 or something. I suspect other people, it was kind of already going pretty good by the time I saw it, but the trucks weren't there yet. But it was in state trust land, but you could see it from the road. Like, are there parameters? Like, how does that work?
So, Madam Chair and Councilman Waring, thank you for the question. So that is not, if it's within the city of Phoenix, there isn't any issues as far as us flying over, for instance, state trust land or BLM land or forest land. Our only real restriction is around the airports. Those are restricted airspaces, which we have a mechanism to communicate with the tower to fly in those spaces. So that's not an issue. We could certainly use the drone in that incident. Obviously, in your area, you have different types of land, and we can certainly use it in all those areas in your district.
I'm glad to hear that. Thank you, Madam Chair, for letting me ask the question. Because you would be blocking out pretty large areas if there were restrictions. So I'm pleased to hear that we can get the full use of this technology, because that is, when this first came up, that was certainly one thought that I had, that this is perfect for that, because otherwise that's a lot of open space that's not really being monitored on any kind of hourly or daily basis. Thank you.
This next incident I wanted to share with you is a recycling yard fire, certainly something Councilwoman Ansari is very familiar with. So the picture on the left is the same fire as the picture on the right. The picture on the left is what our command officer would typically see. Back of a fire truck, some smoke ahead, and that's the only information they really have, so they're trying to make real-life decisions based on that. The picture on the right is the same incident. We have the drone overhead. We can now see what the layout of the area is, where the fire is, where the fire might be going, what our exposures might be, best access, what firefighters are doing. So you can see the valuable information we're gaining from the drone. Also to point out is on the lower left portion of that picture, you'll see in that drainage area a fire burning down below. That's debris burning down there. We would have never known that potentially minutes, hour into the incident, if we hadn't had the drone on this incident, so we can get that fire attacked. Had there been more debris down there, that could have been a secondary fire that could have extended places we didn't want to go. So again, you can see the significant difference that the drone adds to our ability to fight fires. And then this picture is interesting. It's a large warehouse fire incident. So warehouses can be 50,000, 100,000, 200,000 square feet. So the picture on the left is what our command team inside of our command vehicle is getting from the drone. You can see on that monitor on the wall, so they can make those real-life decisions and best time decisions. Also, you'll see the picture on the right. This is interesting because the larger picture is actually we can use black as hot. We can change the camera from white as hot to black as hot. So that large picture is the entire warehouse roof is black, so it's warm or hot. That white area in the middle, what that is actually a hole in the roof that the fire burnt through. That white demonstrates cool air being forced out from our ventilation efforts and from the sprinklers and water that's cooling the air down coming out. So now we know where the fire is inside. We now know there's a hole in the roof. Very valuable information from fighting a fire, whether our folks are inside in a smoke-filled building or folks on top of that roof structure walking around potentially. So that's just some of the information we gained in this incident.
Councilman Waring.
Thank you. So I was reading a book recently about New York City, and it was talking about their fire department and so forth. They'd had problems in the 90s and into the 2000s with their radios and communication and so forth. So they had an incident that I'm sure in fire circles, I guess, was in the book. So I assume it was somewhat famous anyway, but I had not heard about it before, not being in that business. A firefighter was in a building in a basement, and he was trapped. But people didn't know he was trying to radio for help, and the radio wasn't communicating because of a glitch in their system. It was actually communicating with a firehouse several blocks away, and there was no way to he did get out, but barely, and it was a lot hairier than it probably needed to be, given that he was calling for help. So with that scenario, with a extremely smoky building and someone trapped, so the drones could go in with the cameras. Can they see through like if it's a really thick fire, can they see through and find somebody? Or will they identify a child laying in a bedroom or something? Like, how does that work when vision is clearly impaired?
So, Madam Chair and Councilman Waring, so another very good question. Obviously, communication and firefighting is vital to our life or death often, as you mentioned in this incident. So the use of the drone right now, you're really moving into our future state of where we would like to be. But yes, through using the heat sensitivity of the cameras, if you had it on black as hot or white as hot, you could go in there like we use a thermal imaging camera. That's what our firefighters do today. They go in a smoky building, they have a thermal imaging camera, and we actually search a room that way, and we can see that heat signature to find a potential victim, whether it be a resident living in the home or a firefighter. If something were to go tragically wrong or horribly wrong, we could try to find that firefighter. So the potential is there for the drone to do that as well. Again, our program is early in development, but the potential to go in that situation where we couldn't send somebody in or make access, yes, the technology is there that we could do something like that to help those efforts, a search effort.
And that New York story I mentioned, that's obviously quite a bit dated technology. I'm sure, the radios and everything, that's been refined. But, a child in a bedroom or something, or someone who can't get out, they're not going to have a radio. They're just going to be laying there. So you'll actually be able to use, going forward, sensors just like you do on your technology right now, if I understand it. The drones will be hooked up with that same apparatus.
So, Madam Chair and Councilman Waring, yes, that could be possible. I would just say that, our first priority is life safety. So when our crews arrive at a fire, their priority is to go in and search and find any victims. So they're probably always going to be faster and quicker than we could get a drone deployed out there for life safety for our residents or our community. Again, we have the TIC cameras. Our training dictates how we search rooms in smoky areas, how we use the TIC camera. So I think our fundamental skills are still going to be very, very good at locating those victims. If we had a situation, an elongated incident, a trapped firefighter, conditions had worsened, then the drone could be used in that situation as well.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you. This next incident, again, I'm just a few examples to show you how we use the drone so far. Is the picture on the left is actually a roof collapse. So this was in the city of Peoria. The Peoria Fire Department asked us to come out. This was on one of our very significant monsoon seasons. You might have heard about this, 75th Avenue and Thunderbird. This Bash's store had a ponding on top of the roof, and that top left picture is where the roof collapsed. So we're able to get the drone overhead and really give the command a better idea of what the roof structure looked like, where the collapse had happened, what other vulnerable areas were potentially in that roof as well. Again, this is important as we send people in or don't send people in the structure. We want to know what the tenability of that structure is, both inside and on top of our firefighters. So another extremely valuable situation that the Drone 1 proved. And then the picture on the right is actually, you might have remember seeing the text we sent to you, is we had an incident where several people were hiking as a group and several people had an incident. We had to actually rescue multiple people out of one attempt, if you would. And so this was actually the drone overhead showing our command team all of our rescuers working and assisting those different individuals that were in different really state of how much help they needed. Some just needed assistance walking down, some needed us to effect a rescue on, and this kept the command team apprised of really where the state of each of those rescues were at any one time during that. Something we just simply would not have been able to have without the drone. So to date, in summarizing where we're at, again, we're 6 months in, I think, yesterday to our program. So to date, through December 1st, we have flown 411 flights. We have
Sorry, Chief. We have another question from Councilman Ward.
Not all my silly questions. The mountain rescue. So I think it's true that if we have to send a helicopter up or something to rescue you and you've been negligent, we charge for that, right? Is that?
So, Madam Chair and Councilman Waring, we do not charge for mountain rescues at this time. That is certainly something that's been discussed and brought up. Our position has always been, we want to make sure that if someone's in need of a rescue, even if they maybe by a poor choice of their own, that we want to make sure that they are not inhibited in any way to calling us and letting us come rescue them. We would hate to have somebody afraid to pay a bill and that it didn't call 911. So that's why we've always really refrained from charging for that. I know we certainly have on the those that drive into washes, the stupid motorist law, that mechanism. But on mountain rescues, our crews are trained. They're there. They're in service, and that's a role we fill, and we always felt it was best not to try to charge for that.
No, I appreciate that. I was misremembering, obviously. But let me reframe it a different way. Are there areas where, putting the helicopters up is really expensive. So is there a possibility that the drones will show, there's a different path, we don't need the helicopter and so forth? I assume the drones are a lot cheaper than sending up a helicopter, and walking up is a lot cheaper than flying up and flying somebody out. Is that a possibility that it will actually save taxpayers money because we'll be able to still effect the rescue, still do it in a timely fashion, but not doing it with the full boat helicopter?
So, Madam Chair and Councilman Waring, short answer is yes. In fact, it's one of the areas you'll see the last slide about how we quantify the value of our program. Okay. That is exactly one of the ways we know we will be able to show value. Yes, there is many times our goal is to get that drone overhead and not have to bring in the PD helicopter for reconnaissance or information, potentially like getting our rescuers up there. They can rescue through a less costly or less invasive way and not have to do a hoist operation. So yes, our plan, and that is why one of the nature codes I talked about, mountain rescues, that is one of those we knew early on the UAV and the drone would actually demonstrate significant value to the city from a financial perspective, but also from a rescuer and also to that person in need of help, right? We can find them quicker oftentimes. So yes, anytime we can put that drone overhead and gather that information, it's going to be cheaper than having the helicopter do it. It allows the helicopter and PD to do other missions that they certainly have, and so we are utilizing that anytime we possibly can.
Thank you.
All right, moving on. In 66 flight hours, we've had 34 incidents we've responded to, and we've been in service 122 days, and that was as of December 1st. So I wanted to talk a little bit about our outreach efforts. So obviously, the City of Phoenix being a major metropolitan city, the Phoenix Fire Department being a very nationally recognized fire department, what we do always garners interest. And so we had a lot of interest and inquiry about what we were doing in our program since we were bringing one online. And so we've been fortunate to have that, and we're excited to share what we're doing. We're proud of what we created. We think we've created something very unique and very beneficial, so we certainly want to share that with others. So because of that, we have been able to present at multiple high-profile events. So one of the biggest ones was the Commercial UAV Expo in Las Vegas. This is the largest UAV event in the country, and so that top picture is myself and our program manager, Brian Giernan. We're invited to go to that program, that expo, and share about our program. We shared about our governance structure and our AR and how we as a city are implementing a UAV US program. We also then about the fire department's policies, procedures, and how we're using it. There was a lot of interest in that at that conference, and we're proud to be able to go out and really showcase what Phoenix is doing. We also have shared at the Route 50 Future Cities webinar. This was about how cities are using technology. I believe the mayor was part of this as well, and so we were able to share how we as a fire department and as a city are using UAV technology to basically be more effective, more efficient in what we do. We were able to present at the Utilizing Drones in Firefighting and Search and Rescue Operations webinar. And then finally, we were able to share at the Arizona Drone Festival here in Phoenix as well. So really proud of the work, as I said, and we want to share it. Again, others have paid it forward to us to help build our program. We want to do the same to others as well. And we will continue those as well. A couple other areas where our reach has within the department of the city here is we assisted I want to get this title right here. We assisted the Embassy of Indigenous People at the request of the Aviation Department. So they had an event, and they wanted us to come out and use the drone to capture a culturally significant, say at a rudimentary example of a sundial is how I would describe it, but something was important. And so they wanted to capture that in a video and in a picture for this event. And so you can see that picture there is us using the drone out there and assisting aviation in this event. We also have been assisting the Parks Department in building their program, but also they needed some information that only could be captured through video and through the drone, so we went out and captured that as well for the Parks Department. And then finally, we partnered with the South Mountain High School STEM program. They have a very robust aviation, pilot, and UAV program in that school, and so we've been collaborating with them as well, talking about our program. And then finishing up here, where we want to go in our future. So first, we want to build a sustainable program. We've been working this year to create a budget and expand to our staffing, expand to our drones we have. So we really want to create that sustainable program now that we know what we need. We want to expand our deployment model and identify those areas we are using it today, but we know there's more nature codes we can send units on and can add value, so we're going to continue to expand the deployment model. We want to introduce a streaming technology. This is the next piece for us. We want to make sure that when that drone is overhead, we can share that through video feed to responding units or to command officer responding or back to the fire chief sitting at his desk on a major incident. He may want to see that, not be able to get to the incident quick enough. So we want to be able to share that information, so we're definitely moving to a streaming technology. We want to diversify our fleet. As I said, we started very small with drones we could purchase quickly. We know we have other use cases. We want to increase payload, increase cameras, and quality cameras, to Councilman Waring's point about looking and maybe potentially finding people, those types of things. So we want to expand the fleet and diversify the fleet based on our needs. We want to expand on our non-emergent applications. A big one would be in our fire prevention efforts. Again, those pictures on the right are actually 3D mapping that the drone can do. So we could send that out to the recycling yard fires or mulch fires to make sure that those facilities have the access lanes are wide enough, the piles aren't too tall. We can do all that with the UAV. So we want to expand that technology into those efforts as well. We want to continue those public safety partnerships, both regionally and nationally. They're invaluable in everything that we do. And then lastly, we want to quantify the impact. So I already talked a little bit about how on that one incident, the brush fire incident, we were able to release crews much faster. We also want to be able to not have to send crews by getting that information from a drone quickly. So we're going to look to quantify those impacts in reduced responses, in returning crews back in service faster, and then reduced need for the helicopter, particularly on mountain rescues, but it could be on other incidents as well. So those are just some of the areas that we are looking to quantify that as well back to mayor and council and into our community. So with that concludes my portion of the presentation. I'm happy to answer any specific question you may have for me. If not, happy at the end to answer any other questions you might have.
I have a quick question. Have you considered using the UASs in the outside combustible storage projects, or are you doing that already?
So, Madam Chair, that is, when I talked about the piles, those types of things, that's exactly where I think it would fit nicely. It could be in all fire prevention efforts, inspections, but certainly in those outside combustibles, because those are large areas, pile size, access lanes, where our water sources. So, yes, we want to work with our fire prevention staff and in the outside combustible program to let that drone program really benefit and help them be more successful as well. So yes, we plan on doing that.
And do you think without it being too difficult, there will be a time that you would be able to quantify in some way how many resources we're being able to save by using the drone in different situations potentially?
I believe, yes, that is our goal, is to be able to, as we capture these incidents and we know, for instance, we're able to release crews faster or not send crews, for instance, South Mountain Inside I talked about, not have to send crews to the south side when we know the patient's on the north side. Or if we can, reduce a recycling yard fire or a fire like that where the fire never occurred or was a small fire, which our efforts in the OCS program have certainly directly resulted in that. We can quantify that as well. So that's our goal. Our next step in, to future presentations or future information is to really try to really give you that, quantifiable impact of the drone program.
That would be great at the 1-year anniversary to hear about those kinds of impacts to our resources and our budgets. Wonderful. Thank you. Our next section.
That'll turn over to Commander Lee.
Thank you, Chief Walker. Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. So my portion is covering a quick overview of the police department's use of the program. We are happy to report at this point we just passed our 30-day introductory time period since we went operational. So just as a quick recap, we received our final approval from the Executive Committee back on October 19th. We immediately had identified 17 pilots within the police department, 12 of which were placed into service immediately and put on standby. But we identified these folks because they all had already received their Part 107 training, which accounts for roughly half of the training that we had anticipated having to put our folks through in order to get them operational. All of these officers are sworn, and they also are serving in a collateral duty assignment, which for us just means that they are assigned to other details with other call-out responsibilities in addition to being pilots for us. We were able to partner with Glendale Police Department's drone squad. They actually are using the same DroneSense database software solution that we are. They were able to help us with our flight school, our hands-on training, got our people up to speed much more quickly, and have proven to be an outstanding partner for us throughout the region. And our program officially commenced on Monday, November 7th. So again, just as a reminder, the Police Department's UAS program was always focused on 3 use case areas, which would include the investigative support for crime scene mapping, our tactical support, and event management. To date, as of December 10th, when this presentation was prepared, the police department's had 30 UAS deployments, and they have been broken out in these following categories, 9 of which were for our investigative support requests, which would include violent crimes, homicide scenes, traffic fatality scenes. 3 of the deployments were for event management, which included the very first event we did was the Veterans Day Parade, and then we had the Electric Light Parade, and then we had the Zona Fest outdoor music event at Hants Park. 17 of our deployments were for tactical support, and this would include going out with our SAU teams, helping them with search warrants or executing additional investigations that they were in the midst of that they needed our support with. We did have 1 classified as other, and that was just a flight demonstration that was done at the request of the assessors who were actually on scene working with our Compliance and Oversight Bureau. We were in the process, the department is, of being accredited through the Arizona Law Enforcement Accreditation process. So we flew a mission to show them how the drone program worked. This slide represents just a quick snippet of the data that we collect every time we fly a mission. We had originally indicated the items that we wanted to track. We identify the date the device is flown, which of the 3 focus area categories it falls within to make sure it's compliant with what we had originally agreed upon, the departmental report and the incident number, as well as the precinct in which the call was received, and we also broke out the council districts as well, just to make it easier. And then we had just some quick notes on the side so we identify what type of call we were responding to. And looking at the types of calls under the notes section, you can see that the majority of these are usually violent types of crimes in progress, or they are investigative follow-up or tactical type scenarios. This information has also been posted, so the November stats for the first 30 days are posted now on the city's forward-facing portal, and we'll continue to update this on a monthly basis. In terms of us identifying, quantifying impacts, we had some immediate benefits that we had hoped to realize as soon as we went operational. The two photos here are just a couple of aerial photos of some traffic fatality scenes. And the benefits of having an aerial observation platform, as you can see, is that it provides the investigators with a much wider view, a larger perspective of the scene and the evidence field. It allows us to identify evidence collection much more readily than detectives can do when they're actually standing at ground level. One of the things that we hope to be able to quantify in dollars moving forward is the reduction in the call-out overtime that's spent when detectives have to respond from home or after hours to come out to the scene. The detectives are telling us that just in the first 30 days, they're seeing a reduction in the time that it takes for them to collect the evidence using the drones than what they were able to do prior to the drones, and that they estimate that they reduce that time by approximately half. And we only expect to get better as we get more proficient and more efficient in the deployment of this type of equipment. Another benefit to us is that it does enhance our officer safety because it reduces the amount of time the officers have to spend in the street or in the roadway trying to conduct their investigative business. And last but certainly not least is it also reduces the adverse impact of having extended road closures and the frustration that's associated with that to the motoring public, having roads closed for that length and duration of time. And looking at the tactical support area, again, there's some photos here that I'll cover in just a sec, but we did see some, obviously what we had hoped to achieve was the enhanced officer safety, being able to use technology instead of people. And it does provide us with a greater on-scene intelligence collection option. We get the information in real time, and it also helps our on-scene commanders to be more efficient in how they deploy their resources and to where. The photos that are depicted on the screen here, this was from our drone support for an SAU search warrant for an armed robbery suspect that was done back on December 1st of this year. And there, as the drone operator, once the tactical operators opened the front door, as you can see, we were able to send a drone in, and in the span of about 7 minutes and 27 seconds, the drone operator operating outside the house was able to go inside, clear every room in that house, and provide a 95% safe solution for our tactical operators without ever having to send a live human being in the doorway, which was the goal that we had hoped to achieve. Once the rooms were clear, the operators were able to go inside and conduct their business, and the drone operator was then able to send the drone over the roof into the backyard and clear the entire backyard, again, without ever having to send a human being into that backyard. And again, in about 7.5 minutes was pretty remarkable to be able to do something that would normally have taken us quite a bit longer to do. And then the last area is our event management. I touched briefly on this, that we've used it for the 3 different events. We also plan to deploy the drones again in support of the Fiesta Bowl that'll be coming up our Fiesta Bowl parade this Saturday. These photos here are from the Zona Fest. It was a 2-day music festival. This was the first opportunity that we had to deploy our drones in adverse weather conditions with the rain and the wind that we had over that 2-day period. It was also used in support on Saturday the 3rd in support of a multi-event night, because we also had the Electric Light Parade that night as well. So again, one of the lessons, the takeaways from this is that because Hans Park was set up with multiple stages spread across the park, for us in the Tactical Operations Center, Command was able to see in real time what was going on in the park, and we were actually able to track the migration of the fans from one stage to the next throughout the park, which allowed us to be able to communicate in advance to the officers at the next stage, okay, you've got a large group coming towards you, to make sure we had our people deployed more effectively, more efficiently, and if they needed additional assistance, we were able to provide that, because we're seeing in real time what the crowd was doing.
Councilwoman Ansari.
Yes.
Thank you. Quick question. So let's say in a situation like a major event like Zona Fest, is the drone able to provide, like, let's say worst case scenario, there is a shooter or, suspicious activity that looks like somebody may, want to engage in a shooting. Would the drone be able to see that and how quick does that information get to the officers if something like that were occurring?
Madam Chair and Councilwoman Ansari, If the information, as soon as it's communicated that there is something suspicious they want us to look at, we would be able to deploy the drone. This was actually deployed right there at the library, so they were on the roof of the library to be able to deploy and have an overwatch position for that area. They tried to stay, for this event, because of the weather, we tried to stay relatively close to that location. But technically, yes, they could have deployed out into the park overhead looking for whatever the suspicious actor might be up to, or if there was something specific that we were looking for, we would have the ability to do that.
So I guess my question is less after the fact of someone reporting suspicious activity than having the drone. But let's say the drone is monitoring the major event throughout the entirety, and has an overhead view. Let's say there's something suspicious happening over here. Is somebody watching that drone footage on the spot and being able to say, like, oh, we see something there that we need to send officers to immediately before it gets out of hand?
Madam Chair and Councilwoman Ansari, yes, that's exactly what we hope to use this for. And we do have somebody monitoring this video footage right into the Tactical Operations Center within our command post, so that we have eyes on. In fact, we have multiple sets of eyes on it because it's up on one of our large screens, so that we can see exactly what the drone is seeing. And if, say, for instance, somebody drops a backpack or a suspicious package, we have the ability to go overhead and take a look at that and be able to help to guide and lead our teams into that so that they can take a look at it.
Okay, that's great. Essentially, I'm asking if the drone has capacity to prevent something horrific from happening with the information that we're able to get from it in real time. Okay, great. Thank you.
Councilman Waring.
So, Madam Chair, Commander, so pick an event, the Super Bowl, when it's happening, kind of the parameters of where people involved in the event are going to be and so forth. We have 5,000 miles of streets in Phoenix. You talked about using it with traffic accidents and so forth. So just picking a random intersection, Tatum and Bell, you get a call saying, hey, there was a big accident at Tatum and Bell. Where does the drone come from? How long does it take to get there? I mean, how does that work? Does it get there faster than a squad car would get there? Or is that an unknown?
Madam Chair, Councilman Waring, typically when we have that type of an accident, you're going to have a patrol unit that's going to be there first. Depending on the severity of the collision and the parameters that we've identified for deployment, when the request is made by the field lieutenant that, yes, this is serious enough, it warrants requesting a drone, they would make the phone call to the program manager, who would triage that request, and then we would go ahead and deploy a drone and a couple of pilots to that scene. So if it happens during business hours, between the hours of 0600 and 1700, if the on-call pilot is working that day, he would respond immediately. If it's after hours, they would be subject to call out from home, and then it would just be travel time to the scene.
So the drone is actually, I guess you'd say, driven to the scene and then put up in the air, or does it fly there?
No, Madam Chair and Councilman Waring, the drone would actually be traveling with the identified pilot who's on standby to respond. So all of that equipment would be self-contained in the vehicle he would arrive.
So there's going to be a while before there's actually a drone up in the air. And I'm not disputing that it could certainly help, but in most cases it's probably not going to be used for this purpose, at least not yet.
Madam Chair and Councilman Waring, that's correct.
Only in a situation where the on-the-scene officer is like, I could really use a view from up top. Could you send somebody up? And then they're going to have to wait a while. I don't mean to be argumentative, but it undermines a little bit, all that time, the traffic is probably just sitting there or being rerouted or whatever until you can get the pilot there. If there's information that is needed by the drone to make the officers on the ground feel like, okay, I understand the situation now, here's what we're going to do. Do you see what I'm saying? I mean, okay, but I mean, it can't hurt. It certainly helps. How far do these things fly? How long do they stay in the air, and what's their range? How close do you have to be to it to send it somewhere else?
Madam Chair and Councilman Waring, as far as the range, again, we still are testing the outer limits and the boundaries of where we deploy. We have adopted a very conservative approach given the municipal environment that we're working in. We don't want to send it too far out, but we continue to follow the manufacturer's recommendations based on the model being utilized at the time. So typically we have seen probably within a block or two As long as we have visual line of sight with the device, we're able to fly, depending on, again, the landscape, the topography, what the environment looks like. But again, we're gonna operate within those recommended specifications from the vendor.
So you have to have a pilot pretty close by. It's not venturing very far from where they put it up in the air, right, geographically. Then how long can it stay up?
Madam Chair and Councilman Waring, typically we're getting about 20 minutes per flight. Again, depending on the model that's deployed, each one has a different battery capacity and storage, but usually about 20 minutes per flight. And then they can actually land it. They do, with some of the models, they can do what's called a hot swap. They pop a new battery in, and they're able to get it right back up in the air, and then they can resume flying.
All right, well, so hopefully the battery capacity and the time it can stay in the air will improve for a major event or some, shooter running through a neighborhood or something. I mean, it could have to be up a lot longer than that. So, okay. All right, I recognize, I'm not trying to pick it apart. I recognize that it's a new program, and obviously it's just getting off the ground, no pun intended. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Are those industry standards, the 20 minutes, is that about typical of the type of drone you all need?
Madam Chair, typically the models that we have, anywhere from that 20-minute to 28-minute, somewhere in that area there is pretty standard. We typically try not to push it to the absolute maximum. We'd rather land it safely and swap them out and redeploy, but that's usually about the average we're seeing.
Okay, thank you.
That's the last slide. Happy to take any questions.
I think we already hit you with those, so we'll go over to Jared from Parks.
Thank you, Commander Lee, and thank you, Madam Chair and members of the subcommittee. I'm Jared Rogers, Deputy Director of the Natural Resources within the Parks Department, to provide a brief update on our UAS system. Just as a reminder, within the Parks Department, our intent is to use the technology for trail inspections to identify problem areas on our trails where erosion may be occurring. Also to help monitor cultural resources. We have a lot of archaeological sites. This technology can be a fantastic way to monitor those sites over time without having to introduce additional foot traffic that could be damaging to them and to the areas around them. Also invasive species to be able to monitor. You can photograph landscape and identify species and quantify how much of an invasive species there is, and this will help us to track efforts in removing those invasive species. Also, similar to the invasive species is trash and debris identification. I did mean to mention, and I kind of skipped over, I wanted to thank both the police and fire department. They are first responders in the real sense of the word, and on this program, they've also been first responders and very helpful to us. Chief Walker had mentioned they were able to take some really nice footage for us that we used at our South Mountain Environmental Education Center. So if you go visit that center, which is now open, you'll see some of the nice footage that helps to educate, which is a large part of what the Parks Department will be focusing on with utilizing UASs. As I mentioned, they're the first responders. We're a little bit behind them, but we are working towards...
Councilman Waring
has a
question.
Thank you. I appreciate it. So we've had a few issues. I've heard about them in other parts of the city, but have happened in District 2 in parks or preserve areas, encampments. So when the drones are up, flying around, I assume somebody's watching the monitor or whatever, I guess that's how it works, the whole time, correct? And if they saw, hey, there are tents and stuff out there, that then you guys would know and send out rangers or something?
Right. Thank you, Madam Chair and Councilman Waring. Our intent when we have the program up and running is we would be looking at the behaviors related to, we're not necessarily looking for people specifically because people are allowed to be in the preserve, but if there is excess trash that's accumulating a big tent site that could be a fire hazard or could be damaging to the preserve itself, then we would use that to identify an area that needs ranger cleanup and assistance to rectify that situation.
I'm sure you recall we heard earlier about the state trust land again in my district, but I'm sure other parts of the city as well, but certainly in mine, where there have been fires and stuff, set by people who are basically living out there. So it's not without its damage to both the environment and city property. So
absolutely.
Okay. Well, thank you. I appreciate it. I don't know if there's been any examples where you've actually had that happen yet, but you will soon enough.
Yeah, I think that is absolutely accurate, that when we do have our program up and running, we will see that occur. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we are at the point where we're ready to submit. We have our draft SOP ready to go, so we'll be submitting that soon to the TS&P committee, where we will make sure that we're adhering to the FAA guidelines and the City of Phoenix AR, which is both police and fire have talked about earlier today. And just as a reminder, my last point is that the program that we'll be utilizing in the Parks Department is designed to protect wildlife and the preserves themselves. So that's where we're at. Thank you. I think with that, we would pass it back down to Lori.
Councilwoman Ansari.
No questions. I just wanted to thank you all. It looks like from the data that the launch, whether it's 6 months in the fire department or just 30 days, police, parks, it seems like the program is off to a great start. And I'm really happy to see the results and hope to see the success moving forward. So thank you all so much for the hard work that you've put into it. And especially when it comes to lives being saved, I think that is the ultimate benefit that we can get from a program like this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Sorry. How many drones do we have in the police department, Commander Lee?
Madam Chair, currently we have about 12, three different models for different applications.
So when the Super Bowl is here, how will you determine how to activate which ones where and at what activities?
Madam Chair and members of subcommittee, so we're actively looking at that now based on the activities and the venues that we know will be happening in the downtown area. We'll be putting together developing an operations plan that will dictate where the larger crowds are, where the likelihood for public safety concerns might be the greatest, and we will develop those plans accordingly. But we will be looking at things like high traffic levels, ingress, egress routes, areas that may be more complex in the downtown area that might require an enhanced field of view for us to make those decisions on the fly as we are managing those people and vehicles in the downtown area. So those are all factors and parameters that will be looked at in developing that plan.
And do you anticipate that all 12 drones would be assigned to doing something during the Super Bowl, or would we reserve one or two for other types of incidences?
So, Madam Chair and members of subcommittee, we would not have all of them in service at one time. We would identify a couple of two-man teams that would be pilot teams that we would deploy on any given shift, and we would also make sure we reserve the capability to respond to normal duty traffic should the need arise.
Excellent. I'd like to commend you all on the hard work that you have done, and the lives we're saving and the lives we're keeping safer by doing this. I look forward to hearing more about how this impacts our Parks Department once they're online. But thank you for being here this morning and sharing the results with us.
Madam Chair, I actually do have one more thing we want to show you.
Sorry,
about
I
the
tried
program.
to cut you off.
If you don't mind. All
right, I guess you can finish, Lori.
I want to actually just share this piece because it is important to make sure that we are following up with our commitment to you to be transparent and do we need to pause for quorum? We're okay.
We're going to take a short recess in general. I think we have some other folks. Okay, so we'll be back in just a few minutes.
Okay.
Okay, we'll call the meeting back to order. Please continue, Lori.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the final portion of our presentation, I wanted to talk a little bit about how we're communicating what we're doing with each of our drone programs, both to the council and to the public. You may have noticed in the daily updates that you get from the police and fire departments that you've started to see inclusion of drone usage in those reports when you receive them. So we're making sure that when we use drones on a particular scene or event, that is included in the reports that go to you. There's also a monthly report now available on our webpage, which is dedicated to our drone program. So that website update now includes an overview of the drone program itself, information on our committee process and how the approvals are made. It also has our actual policies, both our citywide administrative regulation as well as the standard operating procedures for the departments on that website, and we'll continue to add those as the Parks Department comes online. We'll add that, for example. It also has presentations from our presentations to this committee as well as to the community and our community engagement presentations, and each month it's updated with reporting data. So if you look at the website, you'll be able to see the actual usage data similar to what Commander Lee showed for the police department for each of the departments and what they're using the drones for. So the website can actually be found through the city manager's page. You'll see a tab for unmanned aircraft systems in the list there. If you click on that, you'll get to the actual page, and then you can locate each of those items that I just discussed. So I just wanted to make sure to share that with the committee as well. And this is an example similar to what Commander Lee showed of what kind of data you can find on that page. And that concludes our presentation.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that, Lori. I think it's incredibly important. I appreciate you and all of the departments ensuring that the council's updated on the usage and that it is easily accessible to our public for full transparency, which is incredibly important in this program. So again, I commend you on getting things up and running and doing all that you can to keep our citizens safe as well as our employees. So thank you. All right. We will move on to item 6. Rendering aid and training on active bystandership for law enforcement. And for that, we have with us Assistant Chief Sean Connolly.
Madam Chair's members of the subcommittee, good morning. I think collectively we should be very proud of this item and the discussion we're about to have centered around it. So it involves a policy update and conversation centered around rendering aid, and then also some training updates around a really intelligent program of active bystandership for law enforcement. So very briefly, I'm going to give you a little overview of the focus areas for the presentation today. We're going to talk about current policies. We're going to talk about where those current policies are then going to expand with some policy expansions. And then we'll talk a little more about ABLE, the training that's going to drive the enhancement of some of this policy. And then I'll give you a training update on where we are year to date based on ABLE. So currently within the policy, we have duty to render aid. And simply put, that is our moral and ethical obligation to provide medical treatment. And so it reads, employees are responsible for requesting medical treatment for subjects against whom force was used. Anytime there is an injury or an alleged injury as a result of force used by department personnel, employees will examine any person claiming injury and render aid, first aid, if necessary, request medical personnel to respond to the scene, if appropriate, and immediately notify a supervisor. Current policy related to duty to intervene. All employees will intervene when they know or should know another employee is using unreasonable force. All employees will immediately report excessive force verbally to a supervisor. And then at the top of all of this, as we begin our force policy in 1.5, we discuss the sanctity of life. The department respects the dignity of all persons and recognizes the sanctity of human life, rights, both being civil and human, and liberty. So let's talk a little bit as we move forward into the expansions of three of the policies centered in this. The three current policies that will be expanded are the duty to intervene, the duty to render aid, and the anti-retaliation. And that's going to be really important because we'll talk a little bit about how that is kind of a capstone and a cornerstone related to holding that up. The expansion of these policies will enforce the ABLES program standards and follow national best practice. And we'll talk a little bit about the symmetry between the why, the education, the training, and how then we expand. So just to refresh ABLE, as you recall, in December of 21, Council approved us to embark upon a relationship with Georgetown Law. They have the the Center for Innovation in Public Safety, which is a brilliant and internationally respected center for public safety. And we embarked upon this active bystandership for law enforcement curriculum. It's rooted in preventing harm. We know harm and trauma in community and harm and trauma in our officers is something we need to be abundantly aware of, and where those two intersect at times, we can have challenges. So it's centered in understanding and addressing that. It's also discussing transforming culture. When we look at the theory of change related to transforming culture, it's that middle area that is so important. Not necessarily the beginning or the end. It's the missing middle that really helps us move through changing culture, and this does that. The other part is strengthening communities. This morning I was at Mike McQuaid I Am Home Breakfast, and that is an example of communities collectively coming together and working to create transformation and strength, and so it's really important, and that's the cornerstone of a lot of this. So ABLE is a commitment, and it's a promise to change culture. At the root of organizations and entities is culture, and it's really important that is interwoven throughout the entire organization. It is an evidence-based program out of Georgetown Law, like I spoke. It was originally called EPIC, Ethical Policing is Courageous, and it was spawned out of multiple incidents in the city of New Orleans in 2014. It has since evolved and been updated since the horrific and tragic incidents in Minneapolis in May of 2020 to be active bystandership in law enforcement. Currently, there is 285 agencies enrolled, and it's ever expanding. It's in 40 states. 153,000 police officers are certified, and those 153,000 officers are serving this curriculum to 130 million community members. So how does ABLE training help? First and foremost, it's a mindset that helps us prevent and interdict when we see misconduct. It promotes officer health and wellness, which we know there has to be symmetry between our performance and our health and our wellness. And although we are imperfect at times as humans, it helps us address mistakes and attempt to reduce them. It reduces harm to civilian and officers. Community members are protected. Officers are protected. Both community and officers are in safer environments when we embrace upon this mindset. And then ultimately cities and agencies are protected. It improves police and community relations. We know, especially since the last couple of years, that at the core, the most important thing we need to establish is trust and legitimacy within community, and this helps us. This is one of many spokes in the wheel that helps us build trust, foster cooperation, and it creates a safer environment for all. And like I said, this is a dynamic relationship with Georgetown Law. So the 10 ABLE standards, as we move through them, we currently meet most of these, and we're going to focus on two simple ones today, but let me go through and read these for you. We talked of one being community support, meaningful training, and I think the training part of this, and we'll talk a little bit about this, for us to embark upon policy change and culture change, we have to spend a lot of time in leadership explaining the why. And then educating and having our members partake in repetition in that training, then the policy should be implemented. It shouldn't be the other way around. It involves dedicated coordination between multiple entities. And for the 4 and 5, I'll talk a little bit Program awareness. I think the awareness, this is what we're having a discussion about today, which is bringing awareness to the program, but both internally to our members and externally to community. One of the things that we do within the police department, as you know, we're big on symbolism and badges and patches and pins. And so one of the things, it's small in nature, but it fits within our cultures, is we are able to provide a pin that they can wear that symbolizes that I believe in this mindset and that I've gone through the training and embarked upon it. Accountability, I think that's a whole nother part of this discussion. Absent it, these programs come and go. And so as we expand the 3 policies that I referenced, that is what solidifies this and entrenches it within our practice and procedure. So that is the important part of the accountability aspect of this. Officer wellness, reporting, measuring officer perceptions, follow through, and then paying it forward. So let me give you a little update of where we are at currently. As I said, in December of 21, you graciously allowed us to proceed with the relationship and provide us with funding for that. We, in March, activated 25 train-the-trainers that then started in 2022 training members of our organization. Currently, we've had 500 employees attend the one-day, 8-hour training. Approximately, we're striving for 25 employees in each class. And I want to just say there, too, this is mandated for sworn employees, but we've also opened it up and offered it to our professional civilian staff, and we've seen great turnout and attendance by them. 4 classes per month with 100 employees per month. As we move into 2023, we're going to focus on March and April and May with 16 classes per month, 400 employees per month, striving to get to 1,200 employees during those focus months. And then we will go into a second series of focus months in September, October, and November, where we'll do an additional 1,200 more employees. So with that, I am open to answer any questions.
Sorry? Thanks. Sounds like a phenomenal program. I'm wondering, just that last slide, you said 500 employees have been trained so far. Are you able to show correlation or causation from, if there are any instances where an officer has behaved inappropriately or done something incorrectly? Can you show that the training basically is having an effect on their performance?
Madam Chair, members of Subcommittee, and Councilwoman Ansari, that's a fabulous question, and I think we have to be committed to understanding the analytics and the performance on the back end of this type of programming. I think we're so early in on it on some levels. I don't want to call it deferred gratification at the end of the day, but I think we should start seeing the fruits of this within our performance as we move through this first 500. I want to say this. I think it's really important that as we look at how that changes culture and impacts things, as we move into the new year and then we get the 1,200 that you saw in that second phase, our expectation is that we start to see measurable performance differences in those things that I talked about, especially as it relates to establishment of trust. I spend many hours throughout my work week watching body-worn camera video of performance, and I have seen amazing examples recently of officers rendering aid in very traumatic, dangerous situations. So when I see that, we should all be proud of that. And we do have examples of officers coming forward and bringing issues to us related to the conversation that we had about being an active bystander in some of that. And I think I didn't spend a ton of time on the retaliation thing, but that is another aspect that will be galvanized within policy, and that when that happens, if it does happen, it needs to be addressed swiftly, professionally, and a strong message sent to the entire organization that type of retaliation based on what we're trying to accomplish here is not tolerated.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah,
Sounds like a great program.
Based on your timeline, is it the goal of the department to have everybody trained by the end of 2023? So all sworn officers, and then I know you're opening it up to other employees in the police department, but the sworn will all be done by December 23.
Madam Chair and members of the subcommittee, that is our goal. Yes. As you saw in that second focus area in those fall months, if you do the math with the 1,200 and 1,200 and the existing 500, that should get us really close to what you just said.
Okay. And then the current policy, the duty to intervene, it talks about verbally making a report. Can you explain why verbally versus in writing, or why not both?
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, I missed the first part of that. The officer's obligation to verbally report to his or her supervisor?
Yes.
Yeah, and why that's important?
Why verbally as opposed to verbally and in writing?
So what we have found is when we are out in the field and an incident occurs, if we say you can do it in writing, that defers the notification to a delayed process that is not healthy for everybody. And so we believe that putting that in policy and in a construct that says you, upon delivery of that, especially with injury, there has to be a verbal notification made. That then starts a really comprehensive documentation process through our response to resistance program and reporting that captures that. I hope that answered your question.
It absolutely did. You're looking for that immediate report rather than there being any kind of delay, which doing it in writing could, depending on when the situation happens. So I appreciate you helping me to better understand why that decision was made. So.
It's then captured, written in reports on
it would
the back
be the
end.
Supervisor's job to...
Two places. It's going to be captured in the officer's report that they'll submit for prosecution, and then in our response to resistance reporting mechanism.
Excellent. I appreciate those additional details for that as well. Awesome. I look forward to maybe getting an update next year on where we're at in this, and especially as you have some more success stories or see that culture starting to adjust there. Thank you. I appreciate it, Chief. Good. All right. And then our last item is for information only. It's our monthly hiring recruitment and attrition report. Future agenda items are available. Are there any requests today?
Can I ask a question about recruitment? If there's nobody here, it's okay.
I don't believe we have Commander Chapman, or Chief Chapman. I just demoted him. Don't tell him. Chief Chapman is not here today.
Okay, don't worry about it.
All right.
Right, thanks.
My apologies. All right, any other agenda requests? All right, well then, everybody have happy holidays, and we will see you in the new year. Adjourned.
Workforce with our American Rescue Plan program, and it also includes a partnership with Arizona Career Pathways. The goal is to remove barriers and to elevate opportunities to advance careers with training and certifications.